Welcome everybody to There's Hope channel. You are tapped into our first official hopeful conversation video of 2025. And we are honored to have the lovely guest who I get to call friend, sis, God sis, all of the above as our first feature, Miss Linz. Welcome to the channel, Linz.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
We're glad to have you. We're glad to have you. So today we're going to be having a conversation with Linz on the topic of grief and growth. It's a real talk on, navigating that space of what it's like to live with grief, what it's like to overcome it, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to get to hear Lynz's story, and we're going to let you just tell us your story from an authentic place, Linz. We want you to feel comfortable and safe to share your story with the world. I believe this story is going to bless people all over the world. And they'll get to see what I've been able to witness for the past 15 years about how much of a lovely soul that you are.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so let's start it off. So just tell the people a little bit about you, what your hobbies are, what you enjoy doing, where you live, where you're from. Come on, tell us
Okay.
about.
So first, my name is Lindsey. He calls me Linz, but nobody else can call me that. I'm Lindsey to everybody else. I am originally from Florida. I currently live in Dallas now.
No.
Um, some of my hobbies include going to hear live music, trying new restaurants, trying recipes, spending time with friends, family, traveling, getting pampered. So that's a little bit about me.
The thing about Lynn, she know how to be pampered. She know how.
Thanks.
Lynn, no, Lynn actually introduced me to facials and stuff like that. Lynn is somebody who's really like helped me get exposure to pampering. So Lynn is also the pampering queen. Okay, y'all need
Period.
to. All right. So with that being said, let's get into the conversation a little bit more. Let's dive in. Uh, Tell us about your first encounter with grief, Lens.
Yeah, so my first encounter with grief was 17 years ago. Um, I got a call on July 11th, 2008. It was a Friday. I remember very vivid details. My brother's friend had called me and said that he had been shot.
Mm.
And it was just a whirlwind from there. Um, I don't know how much you want me to share, but yeah, I was in the movies, got the call. I went downstairs to call my mom. Um, got on the phone with my mom. She immediately started crying. And so I started crying because I knew whatever had happened, it wasn't good. Um, and so, yeah, so that was my first encounter with grief.
So you say you were in the movies and you got a call from, was it a friend of yours or a friend of your brother's?
It was a friend of my brother's. He was essentially calling to see if I had heard the news, and my first thought was, why is this person calling me? He doesn't call me, you know. And so he was like, hey, have you heard anything? And I'm like, no, what's going on? He was like, well, I just heard your brother was shot and he's dead. And yeah, like my heart sank. Um, yeah, my heart sank hearing the news.
Mhm. And I know hearing that news, like I would imagine, should I say, you don't really know what, like, kind of like what to think, what to feel. But currently when you reflect back, how would you say you were feeling in that moment? Thinking, process-
Yeah, so my first thought was, "What? Like, what did you say?"
mm,
Um, and I was honestly in disbelief. Um, because you don't ever think to get a call like that.
mm, mhm,
Um, and I know my brother's friend's intention was good, but there was no he just kind of came out and said it. There was no like, maybe I shouldn't tell her this, maybe I should wait, or it was just kind of like, this is what's going on. And so I immediately just called my mom. My mom couldn't even talk. She just started crying,
mm,
and it was just an a lot of overwhelming emotions, shock, disbelief, sadness, like confusion. Um, yeah, I was feeling a lot, pain. Like I remember my chest getting tight. Um, yeah, it was just a range of emotions happening,
mm,
from the time that I got the call. Yeah.
mm. So it felt real to you immediately. Like even though you said like it seemed you of the news immediately.
Can you repeat that? Because the audio kind of went out a little bit.
Oh, I said so. You started to feel the realness of the news immediately, even though it didn't feel real, yet your mind and your body, did you start to process it immediately in terms of how real it felt? Because I heard you say you were in disbelief, so it didn't seem real, but you said that your heart got tight, you started to get sad and like a range of emotions. So it's like, but it didn't seem real. You immediately started feeling realness, right?
Right, absolutely. Yeah. It was hard to grasp
Okay.
like what happened, but just hearing the news,
Mhm.
um, just hearing the news definitely just brought about, all these different feelings. Like, of course, I couldn't fathom
Mm,
like the extent of what happened because all I knew was, okay, my brother shot. I don't know if he's alive. I don't know. Like, I don't know anything. I
mm,
just know when I call my mom, she can't talk to me.
mhm,
So I knew whatever had happened was pretty serious.
mhm.
You know, um, to be honest, Rich, even I'm just gonna fast forward just a little bit.
Okay.
Um, Even seeing my brother laying in his casket, it didn't seem real. Like
Mm,
I was still in shock. But I guess it was like, okay, this is the reality of what's happening, but it's just hard to grasp it, if that makes sense. I don't know if it makes
mm.
sense, but
It does make sense, and I often try to walk carefully because I've never lost anyone that close to me,
mhm,
but I've known people to pass away, and it's like, man, I just don't.
right.
So I understand what you're saying in terms
Yeah,
of.
yeah.
I think it's also good for us to share a little bit about Dwight because I've heard amazing things about him from people. I've never had the privilege of meeting him,
Mhm,
but I heard he was just like you, real kind. He was also a fellow musician like myself, and that he was really good on drums. And I also just knew about how many people rallied around him because they knew of his character and wasn't the situation wasn't a reflection of him and what he was about. He
right.
was caught in the middle of things. So I think it's important for you to kind of like take a moment and talk about him. So because I know the idea of like, oh, someone being shot, negative ideas kind of come, like a negative connotation can be tied to that. Like, so
Yeah.
kind of speak about the character of your brother and, just how he.
Yeah. So, me and my brother, we were super close. We were almost literally a year apart at the time that he passed away. He was 19, I was 18. His birthday was June. My birthday was in July the next year. So I feel like, I don't know if that's called Irish twins. I'm not sure, but we were just really close, like just growing up together, him being a grade, higher than me. He was super protective, like almost probably a little bit too extreme, but super protective, super sweet, solid, just a solid guy, loyal friend. I don't know if my brother had enemies. If you didn't like him, it was because you were a hater. Like he was just cool with everybody. Like he, had all types of friends. Um, Super funny, like kind of like a class clown. Like he just kept everybody laughing. Super helpful to my mom. Like around the time that he passed away, my dad was sick, and he kind of took on extra responsibility to help do the things that my dad physically couldn't do at the time. Like he just a solid guy, like just everybody loved my brother. I just don't. Yeah, I really can't think of anybody who, didn't like him.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just
And like I said, that's exactly what I heard. But also to just be very clear, he was caught in the middle of two people who had something going on. And
yeah,
this was not his situation.
right, absolutely.
It
Yeah.
of him as a person. He was, like you said, young, vibrant, kind, protective, and even the way it happened, he was trying to reconcile things and not have things explode the way it did. So I want to just make sure I took that moment to speak about him because you've told me about him, I've heard about him, and I want the world to know like this was a beautiful man, a beautiful soul person.
Absolutely.
But as we go forward, like so now you've lost this protective figure. You've lost your Irish twin, if that's what it is.
Mhm.
You've lost your blood. Someone you can trust, and you don't have another brother. So, kind of talk to us about what it's been like trying to not necessarily fill his shoes, but you know, have someone in your life that could do the things that he was doing for you. All you know, that shoes, but kind of talk to that.
Um, so I think a big part of it was I don't think I fully trusted men's intentions when
Mhm,
I met men, and it didn't really matter like in what environment. If I can just be honest, even meeting you,
mhm,
um, I couldn't understand I couldn't understand why you were just so kind,
mhm,
you know, why you were just like so generous and genuine towards me. And because I didn't have um, like him as like, somebody like to ask, like it was kind of hard to let my guard down around you, you
mhm,
know. Yeah, I and then I think even learning to trust you as somebody that you don't want anything from me.
mhm,
I really started to be able to witness the beautiful person that you are.
mhm,
Um, And even so much that I've adopted you as my brother, and it's been a beautiful journey, and I could have never asked God to give me a replacement, but He definitely put you in my life, like no doubt, like I don't doubt that at all, like. You were put in my life for a reason. We met for a reason, and yeah. So.
Yeah, because how we met was even organic. We met at church, but it was just kind of like, hey, um, and we were part of the singles ministry and all of that.
Mhm.
I don't even like when we talk about it. I don't really even remember just like this. Like I gotta do this. It was just organic, like making sure you got your car. Like, hey, did
Mhm.
you go place? Uh,
Yeah.
on you. Uh,
Mhm.
that's just how our friendship grew. Or I didn't even know that your guards. What was in my heart. I didn't know at the time. I didn't know
Right.
because when we met, I was actually the drummer at the church.
Mhm.
All these coincidences I just happening, and like we've discussed before,
Mhm.
who you have been to me and how I've been to you, about the God thing.
Mhm.
But of course, I never feel the shoes of Dwight. Y'all have childhood memories. Y'all are blood family. Y'all are Irish twins. I mean, talk to us about like what it's like trying to understand why he was taken away so soon, or if at all. That's like one of the hard questions. Like, God, why did you let this happen? So, kind of speak to how you were navigating through that, him being gone. So,
Um, that's an interesting question. I think I asked God a lot of things.
mm,
Um, and I'll even go back to when I was in the movie theater and, you know, um, after calling my mom and her not being able to talk, I knew whatever had happened, it was serious. And I just remember praying, um, God, please let him be okay. Like I didn't know, like I said, I didn't know if he was alive or dead. Regardless of what, his friend had said, I didn't know personally.
mm,
I'm just going based off like, okay, this is his friend who called me. I haven't been able to confirm from my mom. So I was literally outside of the theater and, just boohoo crying. And I just said, God, please let him be okay. You
mm,
know, um, and when I finally, well, so fast forward, once I got home, nobody actually like had to say that he was gone, but when I pulled up to the house, I saw all these cars. So I knew. And then people were texting me. I saw things on Facebook and I had to just like shut it down. Like people were saying rest in peace. So I'm essentially getting news from other people. Um, and it just wasn't real. And it's like, okay, I prayed, but I'm finding out and also in real time based off the text messages that I was getting, based off Facebook posts, like he was gone,
mm,
and not I never got to a point to where I like blamed God, but I just wondered like how did this one bullet, it wasn't multiple,
mm,
it was one. I've heard of people getting shot multiple times and surviving.
mm,
And I'm like, why couldn't he live? Like why I really did wonder, why did he have to die?
Mm,
You know, I never got an answer, but those were some of the things that, definitely crossed my mind. And just knowing the circumstances around it, like, there were times that I was angry, not angry with God, but I was angry because I'm like, this could have been avoided.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
And it's like you have now this situation that my brother's gone forever. This other family has now lost a brother, whoever, to the justice system.
mm,
And this dispute, whatever was going on, I can almost guarantee you that it was not as, well, I won't say it wasn't as significant, but when it comes to somebody losing their life,
absolutely.
like, how do you compare? Like,
Mm,
was it really that serious? Are y'all even together today?
mm, mhm,
You know what I'm saying? So I I just felt a wide range of emotions. And of course it's like I had my faith, and I wanted answers from God. I never got them, but all I knew was to pray.
mhm,
I just knew, like, God, I don't understand. It's definitely not fair. It wasn't God's fault. Don't I never at one point did I like look at God and was like, you did this. Absolutely not, because I know that wasn't the reality. Like, I
mhm,
was never like angry at God. I was just like, we come from a good family. Like, we try and reason, like, as to why this should not have happened.
right.
Like, thinking about my dad being sick and how much he was helping. And he was only 19. Like, he hadn't even touched the surface of being a man.
Absolutely.
He was a good guy. Like, I'm like, one bullet, one, I don't know. It was just a lot of questions that I had at the time, like, because I didn't understand. It was just it was just a
Mm,
lot that I went through.
mm.
Just trying to pray, trying to stay connected. You know,
And that was, your first encounter with grief. Like,
absolutely.
there's been other encounters, so
Mhm.
I want to ask more questions, but I also want to you tell your story about your next encounter uh, with.
Ask whatever question you want. It's fine.
Well, but so essentially, I want to ask, like, what was it like that first time around, like navigating, like trying to grow, trying to life, and feeling okay with trying to enjoy life after you lost your brother? Like, what was that like? Because you were young, you were 18.
Yeah, it was hard. Something that I don't think I share with anybody. I went through a period of time where, like, I thought I was gonna die this traumatic death.
Mm,
Um, I had a fear that I was gonna die from a car accident, and I know it was as a result of what my brother went through. I don't know where the car thing came from, but I just had this fear that I was gonna die a traumatic death. And um, I remember just like being scared to drive.
mm.
And yeah, I it was now, mind you, it wasn't all the time, that I felt this, like, every time I got in the car. But like, even before I turned 19, I was just scared. Like, I couldn't even, like, fully embrace like, thank you, God, for allowing me to make it because I was scared that I was gonna die,
Mm.
you know? And so that was one instance. I don't think I ever shared that with anybody.
I know, yeah.
And also, like, as I'm telling you this, like, there was no, I mean, not saying there wasn't therapy, but this was before I got introduced to therapy.
I was gonna ask.
So I'm dealing with a whole lot of stuff in my head, you
Yeah,
know. Um, I was, like I said, a freshman in college. Um, I really didn't even have friends like that on campus. Thankfully, I did have a really supportive roommate at the time who became my best friend. Shout out to Alisa. Um, but just trying to get through class, like I remember just like wanting to sleep all day because sleeping helped me to avoid feeling whatever I was feeling, but so yeah, so dealing with like, disruption in my sleep pattern. Thankfully, and I know it was the grace of God, like I continued with school. I didn't quit or anything, like I kept going. Um what else? It's just been honestly every year, every month can look completely different. Um like there have been times where I'm like even going back home to visit and him not being there, like it was just hard to be home around my family because it was a reminder that he wasn't there, you know. So like holidays, his birthday, of course, like, every January is hard. Um, so like even though it's been like 17 years now, like every year has looked completely different. No one year has looked the same. It has gotten easier. Um, but I've dealt with a lot of hurdles that I had to overcome, and honestly, I know it was nobody but God. 'Cause I look back sometimes and I'm like, I don't know how I made it. I really don't, because of the circumstance of like what happened. Like it wasn't just like bury him and then you can start living. Like we had to go to court. So
Mhm.
it was almost like reliving the situation all over again. Hearing details in the courtroom that the public wasn't privy to. It was hard. And I know it was nobody but God that, just got us through it, cuz yeah, it was difficult. It's brought a wide range of challenges that I've had to overcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me ask you these two questions. First,
Mhm.
never thought about. So when the new year is about to come around, do you ever sense and feel like maybe depression or anxiety?
Yeah.
It, like, because I heard you say, every January, like January, a lot of people,
Mhm.
we were graced to celebrate, 2024 going in 2025 this year together. But not at one point in time did it cross my mind that was like the, you know, the tragedy of and the loss of your brother.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say even this past January, like the morning I woke up boohoo crying.
Mm,
And thankfully it doesn't last long, but like you said, it is a reminder that, like, this is what happened, and it is hard. It's this time of year definitely is heavier than other times of the year for sure.
mm. You mentioned like going through the court system in terms of like when they were, I guess, prosecuting the gentleman or the
Mhm.
person who did this. I immediately began to think about like how there are a ton of TV shows, with court involved, and then there are reality, like real situations, like cases to where men lives were taken, and it's blasted on television. Like, does seeing that, whether it's a form of entertainment or just real news happening, do those things take you back to your experience with the whole situation where the guy was in court for your brother?
Sometimes, I would say like in the earlier years, after he passed away, definitely. Not so much now, but um, like there are certain things that I remember. Let's say I remember there was one time I was watching TV and um the movie that I was watching in the theater when he passed away was on TV.
Mm,
And it brought a range of emotions.
mm,
And there was also a movie that was released on the same day that my brother passed away. When I see that movie title, it brings back a memory of that day.
mm,
So there are definitely certain things um, that just trigger me, you
mm.
know. Um,
Yeah, I was gonna ask you that. Like, are there certain smells? Are there certain songs?
Songs for sure, like songs that they sing at his funeral. Um, Even songs that I know my brother liked to play to, because as we talked about, he was a drummer. And
Mm,
so um, one thing my mom used to buy like a whole bunch of like uh, recording, like how Kirk Franklin and the family used to have like live recordings,
mhm,
John P. So my mom had a whole bunch of tapes, VHS,
mm,
for those who don't know. She had a whole bunch of tapes, and my brother would like connect with the song and like try and mimic the drummer.
mm,
And
mm,
so certain songs, definitely, just bring back memories of him.
mm,
So it could be honestly, Rich, there was a time in my life where like I was heavier and I had trouble like looking at myself because my brother was a big guy. He was a big guy. And the
mm,
heavier I got, the more I looked like him.
mm,
And so it was hard just looking in the mirror sometimes, because I saw him. And if you see pictures of him and I, you can see the resemblance. Like we look alike. If you've seen me, you've seen him essentially. Um, and so like I said, there's a wide range of things. Like even like certain shoes that I know my brother would like
mm.
makes me think of him. So yeah.
Yeah, because I was when you were talking about, I'm sorry, that whole imagery thing about you seeing yourself and seeing him made me teary eyed. Um, but you was talking about songs that he would like to play to, and then as a drummer, I know exactly what you're saying, but I think like how it's almost like this grief, kind of, even the pure pain, like having songs or church or even like seeing yourself in the mirror and now it's like changing the dynamics of that moment for you. Like you can't even necessarily just enjoy it fully because now grief face to where like what's normally just like, oh, I appreciate that. Oh, that's so peaceful. That's therapeutic. Now it's like grief has now come into, as they say, grief has entered the chat. Like kind of talk to us a little bit about like you're trying to navigate those moments to be able to be okay. Like, okay, I do remember what happened and it brings me pain, but at the same time, I can still enjoy this moment. Like, how are you able to kind of like work through that to where you can enjoy grief that's come to mind?
Um, I think honestly, it varies because sometimes it's like sometimes I want the moment to pass quickly,
Hmm.
but other times I want to bask in it because it makes me feel I hate to use this word, but for lack of better words, like it makes me feel like he's close to me in a sense.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Um so like even like sometimes I've had dreams
Hmm.
and it's like I've dreamt that like he's like here in present day, like, and it's like I may wake up crying, but then it makes me happy because it's like I got to see him again.
Hmm.
So it's like you just I don't even know how to explain it. It's like you just embrace it for what it is, like you just allow yourself to feel, whether it's sadness, whether it's like, oh, this made me think of my brother, oh, this made me remember him, it's like you just kind of like allow yourself to be present in the moment, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So, like your birthday. So your birthday is a time for you to celebrate. I know um, when you're celebrating, you're also thinking about like how it would be nice for your brother to see how much you've grown, how much you're glowing. How like you have people who love you. So I know you said it's kind of like you allow yourself to feel that emotion in class. Sometimes you want it to go through quick, but in like a birthday, like for like a birthday and the birthday dinner, like is that one of the times you want it to kind of go through quick so you can like really just joyful and happy for another year of life and that people are celebrating you, or do you still want like, or do you still set aside some time to just kind of sit in it?
Um, my birthdays now. My birthdays now don't really affect me like they did earlier when he passed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, now, I'm thinking all about me. Like I try not to bring in anything that may potentially make me sad. I would say earlier, like when I was younger, um, like I definitely like reflected more on like, man, I wish my brother could see me. I wish he were here. I wish um, you know, because my brother he was big on like celebrating his birthday. Like that was big for him. And I was kind of the opposite. I wasn't really big on birthdays, but yeah, I think birthdays now I try and just keep them as joyful
Mm-hmm.
as possible, just really just being appreciative of my life.
Liz is the main thing.
Yeah.
So, as you said, like you kind of grown to that place, and as you share that, kind of want to kind of navigate the conversation forward in the sense that you've grown to this place. So, and that being your first encounter with grief, and you grew from it, and then you experienced grief kind of speak to that, like this next encounter with grief?
Um, so my next encounter with grief was actually very different.
Mm,
The second time was when my biological father passed away.
mm,
He also passed away in January.
mm,
Um, so it was different because, for one, I didn't know him. I had never met him,
mm,
um, and it just brought about a different emotion and different thoughts.
mm,
So it wasn't as hard for me to like navigate that situation as it was with my brother,
mm,
just because it was for one a different situation. Um, I wasn't close to him, but what I will say is that I learned that you can grieve something that you didn't. Uh, how do I say this? You can grieve something that you never had.
mm,
So that situation brought about um, a sadness because it's like now this hope that or this chance that I once wanted or hoped for is gone.
mm,
This idea that I may get to meet the man who was um, responsible for my procreation, regardless of what the situation was with him and my birth mother, like, you know, he was the father. So I had a lot of questions just about my life because when I think about me and my family dynamic, like I always just felt so different,
mm,
and like with him passing away and not knowing him, it just made me feel like there's a part of me that I may never truly know,
mm, mm.
you know. Um, and then, like experiencing Father's Day, it just brings about feelings of like, I wish I had, a healthy relationship with my biological father. Um, Yeah, so it just brought about a different set of emotions or thoughts.
Yeah, you said that you were able to kind of work through that a lot. Did you say faster or easier? I don't want to put.
I would say fast, probably easier. I'll say easier. Because I think the effects of not having him in my life, I think they came to surface
Mm,
once he passed away.
mm, mm.
Um,
What do you mean by that?
So I think I dealt with like some identity issues, like just not being sure of myself.
Mm,
Um, yeah, like dealing with like some feelings of rejection because I like in that process I kind of learned that he had opportunities to meet me, he just chose not to.
mm,
So I dealt with like feeling rejected, feeling abandoned.
mm.
Um, and so I think that really, his death really brought those things to the surface. Um, yeah, for sure.
Mm. Yeah, so even like experiencing your brother's loss, had you gotten into therapy yet once you lost your biological father? So you hadn't even okay. So we hadn't even got into that point of navigating this on like just pure will and strength to survive and to wow. One of the things I've always told you is that you carry, and this is not necessarily, I'm not saying like compliment, but carry this grief, this amount of grief that you experience in a graceful way. Um, and I give you your flowers often because we're friends and we get to have these conversations. But truth be told, the most we've ever talked about your grief as friends because it's not something that I'm good with. In fact, talk a little bit when we talk about your next encounter with grief, but even as a friend, I ended up realizing I fell short of good friendship help when you were experiencing all because I was just clueless about how to move and like thinking like, well, maybe should I do this? Well, I won't be up, but I've just kind of been able to like like learn through you, but at the same time always tell you like you have walked this out with such grace. um, so tell us about, with that being said, tell us about this encounter you've had with grief, and we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so my last encounter with grief was also in January. Um, and the father who raised me,
Hmm.
he passed away due to complications from COVID.
Hmm.
Um, and that was difficult, and it was hard also, um, because the last time I saw my dad, so he's the only person that has earned the title of dad in my life. So shout out to him.
It's about
Yes. So when I just remember the last time I saw him, and he was healthy. He was fine. He was talking, and every time I leave to go back. At the time, I was living in Tampa. I always say, "See you next time." That's what we say. See you next time. And the next time I saw him, uh, he couldn't even say my name.
mm,
You know, um, so in a matter of days, I witnessed him. Like at the time when I first saw him, like he was able to, kind of move, like he could sit himself up, and like he declined very fast. Like I could, like every day that I was going back to the hospital, like I slowly saw him, and I'm gonna use this word because I don't know a better word to say, but I saw him in a sense, I'll just say decline. So, remembering my last time in December of 2021 to now weeks later, um, it was just night and day.
mm,
And what's crazy is that he went into the hospital on the anniversary of my brother's death. So he went into the hospital on the 11th, and yeah, the 11th is the day that my brother passed away. So already, like we're dealing with, it was just like a wide range of emotions. So even though like the doctors were kind of telling us like, you could kind of prepare, that he's transitioning. Like they were trying to get us prepared for that. Um, and honestly, to be honest, Rich, and I know this may sound a little, but I it was hard to accept that
mm,
because if you knew my dad, you knew like he was like a huge man of faith.
Mm,
Like my dad believed God for everything.
mhm, mhm,
Um, and with him, I believe God that same way. Like
mhm,
I believe that this was nothing. Like this was just a little cold, you know. Like I believe that my dad was gonna be okay, you
mhm,
know. And I didn't care how old he was. You
mhm,
know, I didn't care that he was in his 80s. This is my dad, you know. This was the person that, you know, had been with me my entire life, who sacrificed his life, you know, to make sure that we were good. Like, of course, I don't want him to leave. You
mhm,
know, of course, I want him to stay. That's the selfish part of me. You know, you don't. I mean, naturally, you want your family member. Like, you don't. Like, of course, the natural order of things is like, you know, like your parents are gonna pass away,
mhm.
but you don't think about it. You know, like you don't think about the day that is actually gonna happen. You
Mhm.
know, and
What
so
like and be
I'm sorry.
you don't think about the day it's gonna happen and what it's gonna feel like and what it's gonna be like.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, if I could have had it my way, you know, mm, I would have rather him pass away in his sleep, you know, than going through like this slow decline, you know, because it was hard to see. It was hard to, you know, see him one day be almost unrecognizable, you
Mm,
know. And unfortunately, like the staff, like they were so pushy. Like at the time, like I was in almost like a almost felt like I was the one making decisions around that time. So like, you know, when the nurse or whoever would come in, like my mom was so fragile, she would hand me the phone to talk to them.
mm,
And it's like I was wrestling with, you know, like I'm believing God that my dad is gonna be okay. But at the same time, these people are essentially telling us like you
you
need
know,
to figure you need to figure out like do you want him in hospice where y'all can come see him, or do you want him to die alone in this hospital? Because he since he had COVID, he was like they were only allowing like one or two people to come up there a day. So it's like, what do you do? You know, it was just, it was just, it was just hard to like accept what was happening. You
yeah.
know, even though like I could see it happening, but it's like I was holding on to the idea that things could.
Oh,
Yes, yeah, essentially. Um,
and we gotta give Mr. Bubba his flowers. The world know how Mr. Bubba was. I mean, I'll let you as well. I met Mr. Bubba through you. And Mr. A ball of joy. He was funny.
mhm.
He was very hospitable, friendly. He could strike up a conversation about anything. And I just remember him as a man just being like a man,
Absolutely.
you know, just knowing a little bit that I did know about Mr. Bubba. I can only imagine him going from who he was to what you're describing. That
Mhm.
still trying to have that hope that he'd be the Mr. Uh,
Mhm.
rather than what really happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was,
What about his sacrifice? So let's give Mr. Bubba. Of course, my Betty, but my Betty, or Mr. Bubba's sacrifices as a man and give flowers because
yeah, so, uh, it was 4 of us, 4 me and my 3 other siblings were raised in the house together,
Mhm.
And my dad, along with my mom, selflessly took us in, cared for us like we were their own.
Mhm.
My dad worked himself to the bone to the point where he couldn't work no more, you know, because he always wanted to make sure that we have what we need. Like he would literally give his last, to make sure that we were taken care of. Like even with food, and my dad did not play about his food, but if he would always ask, "You had enough?" If he had, I'm gonna just say a last piece of chicken, he would offer his chicken. That's just the kind of man he was. And even, when he passed away, like I heard of so many stories of how, he helped people, just in the community, relatives. Like he was just a giving man, like just generous,
Mhm.
generous, selfless, kind hearted. Yeah, it's just a solid, solid man.
Yeah,
For
Mr.
sure.
Definitely that. Um,
Mhm.
I, I want to talk about two things. Like first one, I kind of want to talk about is so you lost your brother, who's a man. You lost your biological father, who you didn't get to meet, but he's a man as well. And then you lose Mr. Bubba, who's a man, your father. Kind of talk to me because I never actually talk to me about like, how that dynamic of losing these close men in your life besides your biological father, what that has been like now.
Yeah, it's it's been it's been hard because it's like when you think about your core, you think about like what has been um essentially your circle.
Mhm.
And now this circle is broken, and it's like there's been like this void that I've felt, like um you know wishing that I had them there, like they were like dependable men, like they weren't just you know no good men. Like my dad and my brother, they were solid men,
Mhm.
and it's like I just, sometimes just miss, just feeling like I'm supported, like feeling like, even though I'll just say this, I know that I have support with
Mhm.
you.
Mhm.
Um, but it's just like this feeling that I've had, like I don't have, like I ain't got my men, you know what I'm
But
saying? Yeah. It's just a feeling though, because I know I have you. There's others, like my brother, one of my brother's best friends. Like I know I can reach out to him. My mentor has been solid to me. Um, like I know I have people, but it's just like this feeling like, dang, I'm losing all the men in my life.
yeah, the men who were with you from childhood and up.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no way we could ever thank God for he did a nephew, Tyler,
Mhm.
L. And then he also blessed me to have you as a friend, you to have me as a friend. And I didn't even know, like, it was years into our friendship before I really kind of got a feel for like the loss you had. I was just like, hey, let me check your oil before you get on the road. I didn't really know like framework of what was really missing. I was just kind of being myself. You
Mhm.
know, blessing from God. But when we got to Mr. Buck and his loss, I mean, I remember we were praying. We were praying about like, like God, all we have, we want your will to be done. We would like for him to be healed. But when we found out he passed away, kind of tell the story about like how because I know there was an expectation of you from me, and I fell short of that expectation. And I don't want to give like, or this is your story, so I kind of like want them to hear about how you also had to navigate through like expectations from a close friend loss.
Um, so I vaguely remember.
Not you forgetting. Good.
So listen, we extend grace around
Yeah.
here, you know. Ain't no record of wrongs. But so at the time I was still living in Florida. I was in Tampa, you were in Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember you being kind of like silent,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I do remember this.
Mm-hmm.
You were out living your best life.
I
You were out living your
Lord.
best life. Like
Good.
I remember looking on Instagram and you were posting. I was like, oh, okay.
Oh, okay. I was,
But I think during that time, I think I wanted to just hear from you a little bit more.
mm-hmm.
Um, Cause you're now you're a part of my core. You're a part
Mm-hmm.
of my circle.
Mm-hmm.
And you knew who my dad was to me. And
Mm-hmm.
so I just, and I think part of it is because I think part of your disconnect was I don't think you truly knew what I was experiencing at the time.
Oh yeah, absolutely not. I did, but
So I don't think I just don't think it clicked that, I should be, or Lens probably needs me
mm-hmm.
at this time. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And we did talk about it.
hmm
And that was a good thing. I really, when I reflect back, I remember I was before he actually passed. Like during, we were praying, talking, and I just kind of remember just like being disappointed. We doing all this praying, just kind of being disappointed, and then boom, when I finally passed, I might have said like, "I'm sorry to hear that," but I didn't really at that point in time. It didn't click like I should be present, more present, or see how to be present. I just fell back altogether. Like I just wasn't like not like I didn't talk to you at all, but as involved. Um, and we had a great talk about that. You were definitely gracious to me, and in all sincerity, you knew my heart, so you knew like, oh, this wasn't intentional. I really just duck and wasn't really aware of how to be present. And I think for kind of speak to maybe lost someone, had a friend or maybe a close mentor, family member they want or expected to reach out to them more. Maybe you can speak to like helping them like navigate through that, like having like some sort of grace and reconciliation when they're certain of a person's love and commitment to them, because that's something about me. But at the same time, you were genuinely offended and rightfully so, and we had to walk that out. So maybe kind of speak to that a little bit about how someone able to be patient and work through that.
Um, yeah. So when I think about our friendship, our relationship, you're not somebody that I'm not just gonna dismiss you.
Hmm. Hmm.
Whatever offense I feel, of course it's important to communicate it, but our relationship is greater than any offense. So it's like, is this somebody I want in my life or not? And you're somebody who I want in my life. And so with that, you have to learn to forgive quickly.
mm,
You know, not that you like make it insignificant, but it's like I'm not harboring any feelings or like no, like I know you love me, you know I love you.
mm,
We talked about it. Let's move on, you know.
mm,
And so that's kind of the way I approach it. Like you said, I know your heart and
mm,
I know, you know, I just try and think like, okay, he
mm,
hasn't really been through this. I don't think he really know
mm,
um, what I'm experiencing and how hard this has been. Because I do think there's a level of, I think people tend to give certain care depending on the circumstance. And I think with this circumstance, it's like, okay, Mr. Bubba is old.
mm,
Because I think there was a point where you even mentioned, I think you even said that, you know, and even in that, it's like, don't take it personally
mm,
because, you know, you're processing things from the way you would process,
mm,
you
mhm,
know? And so it's like, you just try and be understanding.
mhm,
And, you know, I think it's something that we both learned from, you
mhm,
know, because I don't think I've always communicated to you or anybody else how I wanted you to show up. I think I just had an expectation
mm,
that was not communicated, so that wasn't fair to you,
mm,
you know?
mm. But at the same time, it is like it's a real thing for friends to be there during a time of loss. You know,
Yeah,
it's necessary, and I don't run from the accountability of the offense, and that's what like, we have. Honestly, like the foundation and the beauty of our friendship is that we've been able to work through this, and I think anyone who has friendship, a true friendship, if you know what that means you have to work through things. People are perfect. And what solidifies somebody's heart is over all the time you are not aware, but I was doing thoughtful things, love and kindness as a friend, to where it makes these type of situations, they're still real, there's still offense there, there's still grief going on, but at the same time, it's like I know who this person is. The bond we share has been built. Can't like this, like you said, someone could choose to sabotage, blow the bridge up, but you'd have to do a lot of blowing up to blow our friendship bridge up. It's just so strong, and it's been over years improved. But the reality of it is that there was still, and I accountable. I needed it to be brought. Well, like perfect example, like you said, I never experienced loss like this. Even though I know you lost three men, I watched legalities of your bio dad, biological father. It didn't dawn on me till this year that when someone passes away, people have to like get rid of it, and how that's a whole nother level of trauma. Like getting rid of stuff, making arrangements to get rid of stuff, what you're gonna keep. And it's like, but I have someone near and dear to me who's lost someone, and yet at the same time, it's been it didn't dawn on me this year. I recently heard somebody, "Yeah, my wife's father is possibly gonna pass and be stuff," and I was thinking to myself, "Oh my god, that gotta be." And he was like, like they start getting rid of their stuff. So it didn't even dawn on me that like you had to do that three times until I heard it this. Well, I'm sorry, this is 2025. Heard it the latter part of last year. I'm like, man, sometimes things just don't click, and that's what you mentioned. Like someone has gone through things, um, things just aren't clicking the same.
right,
Like I said, it doesn't excuse the offense, but sometimes things just aren't clicking. And
right.
And I appreciate you for extending me hope, but I also appreciate the fact that we could talk about the offense and, and how it happens in friendship during times of grief. Um, and how there's hope for friendships that, to where you have these things that happen at pivotal times, because losing a vital time in someone's life. So you lost Mr. Bubba, but at the same time, you have an offense from you. So navigating that difficult. So it says, like I've said, it says a lot about the kind of woman and person you are, and how gracious you are, to even extend that grace to me. But at the same time, it also says a lot about our friendship, how we could work through that. And essentially, what you're saying, the advice you would give to somebody is like, hey, if you have a strong friendship, a strong person, communicate how you feel and what the offense was and or is, and strive to move forward.
Right.
Right. Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
Hmm.
It took a long time for me to get to it, but
That's all that matters.
what the old people say, the old preachers say, we get ready to close. Um,
Almost ready.
y'all was ready. So we've we've talked about your three encounters with grief, Lens, and um, of course, this is about sharing your story. But for someone who is experiencing grief right now, or will experience grief in 2025, what would be maybe two or three things you can share with them that would give them hope of, like, they'll get.
Yeah. So you said share something that will give them hope.
Yeah, what are two or three things that you can share that you believe will get they'll get through it, like, the navigating uh, process of grieving.
Um, so I'm proof. I'm living proof that it gets better. As time goes on, you hear people say a whole bunch of stuff like time heals. No, time doesn't heal. It just gets easier.
Mm.
But grief is the emotion that comes with loss, and it doesn't have to take over your life. It doesn't have to, um, you know, define how you live the rest of your life. I think that's something that at one point I struggled with.
Mhm.
Um, but it gets better. It gets better. I would say have something that anchors you. And for me, you know, one thing I would say is that I prayed even when it didn't make sense to pray. you know, um, the time, when I got the call about my brother, and I fell to my knees, and I remember just praying, not knowing that my brother was already dead, but I'm praying because I'm hoping that God will hear me. And I knew he heard me. He just didn't, answer my prayer the way that, I wanted him to answer it, and even, like thinking about the situation with my dad, like prayer is what anchored me in a sense, like, and even thinking about my mom, like I would hear her pray, like, God, I don't understand, but I trust you, and it could just be simple. You don't have to like pray these long, elaborate prayers, like talk to God, the way that you talk to anybody else, but find something that, keeps you grounded, because grief can be so strong that it can really, like, if you allow it, like pull you off course. You can get lost in, just the emotions of it all, and just trying to find like a sense of normalcy, you know. But thankfully, I didn't resort to like anything extreme, but it gets better, day by day. definitely, have a support system. Even if that's one person that, has the capacity and the I would say emotional intelligence to handle um what you're going through. And for some people that may be a therapist.
Mm,
Like I went through years, at least 10, at least 10 before I talked to a professional. And so you heard, I mean, I don't, y'all heard everything that I was thinking in my mind, like things that were coming to my mind that was just so far fetched, like just thinking that I was gonna die from an accident, like just, like you need somebody to like help you navigate, you know, those kind of emotions because they will come.
mm,
Um, so yeah, pray, have a support system, and be gracious with yourself,
mm,
because it's like you're gonna experience a lot, like there's a wide range of things that I dealt with each with each loss, so give yourself grace. If you can take a break from work, take a break from work. There's things set up that I wish I would have taken advantage of. If you have leave, or you have, set up financially to where you can take a few weeks, a few months off, do that because you need it,
mm,
for sure.
mm.
So,
Yeah, I like to share that grief doesn't define a person.
hmm
I like when you said, even though time don't heal wounds, it does here. You talked about like, hey, pray even when it don't make sense.
hmm
Having that support system. I like that you shared all those things, and just the fact that you mentioned two things about talk to someone that has the emotional capacity. I think that's just so important. And sometimes, like you said, that's a therapist. Because even with friends, we're all just kind of doing life. And I remember just at times we would just kind of end up having random conversations. But I would imagine, because I know you as well, like you also needed to have conversations with someone who's like more, like not more, but someone who's a female, someone who can like connect in a way that a female does. Because I'm all man. I think like a man. I talk like a well, I'm all man. Different than it's something I had to accept that I can't be all things to you or any woman because I'm.
right.
So I think those are great points that you made and about like, hey, these are some things that you can be hopeful for. For one, you're a living proof and living testimony of it, and all the great hopeful points about that you shared. Um, I want to just take a moment before we close and just give you your flowers as a person. Liz, you already know how I think about you, right? But just so that the world knows, as I've said even during this conversation, you are an amazing and a beautiful soul. We've had um, times in our friendships, only maybe like two or three times, so it was just like situations we had to navigate through in terms of like offense. But the one thing I can always say is just it's always been safe. I can call you and be like, "Hey, Lance, what's up?" And I can start talking. Um, you've supported me, like always affirmed me, and it's not just you doing this for me, it's who you are as a person. Um, and I mean, I recently was able to read a letter that I wrote to you. Did I bring you flowers with that letter, or was it just the letter? The one that
It
was.
was it was in a card. It
Oh, it
was
was
in
a
a
car.
card you mailed.
Okay,
Yeah. You
okay.
mailed it for my birthday.
Got you.
Mhm.
Like, oh no, it's just hard to find words to put on our friendship. You know what I'm saying? It's really just that much of a blessing. But as I always shared, I couldn't have prayed for a friend like you. And the world needs to know how much you've been through, but just see the grace of God through your life. You know what I'm saying? That you're still a beautiful and a loving soul, hospitable soul. Because I met you church, but I actually got to come to the house near me. And that's when I got to experience your baked chicken, how good it was, and how they, man, whoever you marry, they gonna appreciate you because of how I ate the food. So there was nothing left. And how because I was the drummer, I used to sweat out my shirt. Used to let me come. We'd have multiple services. I'd come over with Jeremy, put my shirt in the dryer. You all, not just to me, but to everybody. Your apartment kind of came up, but you would fix our plates. Like it's just the world don't get to see that side of you. I know they don't because I'm your friend and I don't kind of introverted, but you living your best life here in Dallas. But they need to know just how much of a beautiful soul and role you are. And I just wanted to give you about.
Thank you. I love you too.
Yeah. Do you want to share anything with people before we get?
I think I've said enough.
All right, y'all. I appreciate y'all joining us for our first hopeful conversation with Lindsey. And as I always say, no matter what you've gone through in the past, no matter what you may be facing currently or in the future, you gotta always remember there's hope. Let the people know there's hope, Lens. Tell them.
There's hope.
See you.